everyone. So for this beginner video we're just going to learn how to do some rows of treble crochet, and remember that is UK treble, US this is your double crochet. So we're just literally going to do a couple of rows together. You're going to need obviously some yarn and your hook and some 2 stitch markers, but don't worry if you haven't got stitch markers, you can just use a different colour yarn, and you'll want 2 pieces for that. So you're going to start with a slip knot, and if you're not sure how to do that, then I do have a separate beginner tutorial for that, which is done nice and slowly for you. I will link that below if you need it. And obviously for this I'm just going to do a chain of any number, it doesn't matter because it's just a practice piece. But obviously most patterns that you start will say at the beginning how many chains you need to do and things like that. But this one is literally just to practice the treble crochet stitch itself. So I'm just going to do a chain. So you want to yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through. So that is how you chain. So if you want to just do, like I say, a chain of any length, but I would say to get a good practice you need to have at least 12 or so, but just do a chain of any length. We're going to work along this foundation chain now, and because we're going to be doing treble crochets we want to work into the 4th chain from the hook. You don't count the one that's on your hook as a chain. We're going to start here, so this is 1, 2, 3, and this is our 4th one just here, this one. So you want to yarn over and then you're going to insert into that 4th chain from your hook, and then you want to yarn over and pull up, and you will have 3 loops on your hook. You'll yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, and you'll then be left with 2 loops. Yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. So I'm just going to stop here just for a second. So you can see we've created our very first proper treble crochet just here, but we have also created another treble by the stitches that we skipped at the beginning. So the top of our treble that we have just created is this stitch here. So you can see it sits on top of that treble, and then next to it there's the chain 3, so you've got 1, 2 and 3 chains, and into that 3rd chain here you will either want to pop your stitch marker or you will want to just grab your contrasting yarn and pull it through that 3rd chain, or like I say, you would just pop your stitch marker through that 3rd chain, and that just reminds you when you come back along the other way later that is the final stitch that you will need to work into, and that way you will keep your edges really straight. So we've done our first treble and we're going to do one in every single stitch across now. So again, yarn over, insert into that next stitch along, yarn over and pull up, and you'll have your 3 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through the last 2. So that's your next treble completed. I'll do another one with you. So yarn over, insert into that next stitch, yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through the last 2. So if you want to carry on now, you can rewind or pause now and work your way along your little chain that you have done, and I will see you just as you complete your last treble into the final stitch. So I've just got 1 chain left to work into just here, just in front of my slip knot, and that is my very first row completed of my treble crochet. So to move on to your next row, usually you would chain 3 and turn, but I don't particularly like doing it that way anymore because it gives you a really big gap between your chain 3 and your very first treble. So I've stopped doing that now. So I don't chain anything at all, I just turn my work around. And then this very first stitch right here, where we are now, you're going to work into that very first stitch just here. So your yarn that you're working with will be slightly in your way. So you just want to pull that yarn out of your way a little bit to reveal the stitch that is there. So just pull it back a fraction and insert your hook into that very first stitch. And make sure you go through the whole of the stitch. And what I mean when I say that is you will have a V on the top of your hook just there. You won't have just one loop, you should have two which form a V. And so now we want to create some stitches to make the height of a treble. So you're going to grab that yarn and pull through, and you'll have two loops on your hook. You'll then yarn over and pull through both loops, and then this stitch that we've got here now has got two parallel bits of yarn. You've got one on this side and one here. So you want to pop your hook into the one closest to your working end here. So you're going to pop your hook through the front of that stitch, and then you are going to yarn over and pull up, and again you've got two loops, yarn over and pull through both. And that stitch that we've just created there is the same height as a treble, but it is much thicker than if we had just chained 3. If we'd chained 3, there would have been a big gap here. So that now is our treble for the top of this stitch from the previous row. So now we're going to work our way all the way along, and we are going to do a treble into the top of each stitch. And now that we've finished that stitch, we want to pop a stitch marker in. So I'm going to use a proper stitch marker this time, just so that you can see. And so we're going to move that little loop out of the way, and you can see there is a stitch at the very top, just there. It will look like there's two sets of V's because we've technically done two stitches on top of each other. So you don't want this first one, you want this second one where your working loop will be. So you will pop your yarn or your stitch marker through that stitch right at the top, and then again you will know that that is the very last stitch that you'll need to work into later. So you've done the one for this one, so the next one that you will do is this stitch just here. So you will yarn over, insert into that next stitch again, making sure you've got that V on top of your hook, and then you will yarn over and pull up, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So you can see there now we haven't got any big gaps in between our stitches. And the next, so yarn over into the top of the next stitch, again making sure you've got the V, yarn over and pull up, and complete your treble. And you're going to do that into the top of every single stitch along until you get to the other end, where you will hopefully have either a stitch marker or a piece of yarn that you popped through earlier on. So if you want to carry on doing that until you get towards the other end, and that's where I'll see you in just a second, but I'm obviously right near the end of mine now, so I will just stick with you for now. So I'm just getting to the very end of this row, and you can see here I've got one full treble. So that was our very first proper treble that we did on our foundation row. So you want to work into the top of that treble. And if you hadn't put your marker in, you might think, great, I've got to the end of that row, I'm done, and then move on to the next. But because you've put your marker in, you can see that you have not got to the end of your row and you still need to work into that very last stitch. So I'm going to pull that out, and then into that stitch that I've just taken the stitch marker out from, I'm going to do one final treble into that very last stitch. And so that's how we're looking now, and you can see the edges are nice and straight. So we're going to start on the next row again now, and I'll do this final one with you. So remember, I don't chain at the end, I just turn, and then we're going to start this row in the exact same way that we started the last row. So you'll do your stitch, so you'll go into that very first stitch, yarn over and pull up, and yarn over, pull through both, and then into the side of that stitch, yarn over and pull up and pull through 2, and then again I'm going to pop a stitch marker in into the very top of that stitch to remind me where my final one needs to go. And then I'm ready to move on to my next treble. So yarn over and go into the next stitch and complete your treble. So by now you should be pretty handy at doing your trebles, so I'm not going to say yarn over, pull through 2, etc. I'm just going to do them. But you can always rewind or pause to work your way along if you want to. But I'm just going to go all the way along to the end of this row now, just to firm up in your mind exactly where your final stitch needs to go. But if you've been popping your stitch marker in, then it should be pretty clear where it needs to be. And so by not chaining 3 and by using stitch markers or contrasting yarn, you should be able to get perfect straight edges without any big gaps at the beginning of each row, and they should look really nice. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll have seen me using rows and rows of trebles for my Harry Potter scarves and things, and you will see that the edges on those scarves are absolutely perfect. So again, I've just done my last stitch on the top of this treble here, but you can see, because I've got my stitch marker here, that I haven't finished this row and I still need to do one more treble into the top of that very final stitch. So remove your marker and go into the top of that final stitch. You can see that is how I do my rows of treble crochet, and you can see, I'll just take this out so that you can see a bit easier, that my edges are perfectly straight. So I really hope that this has been useful for you. Like I say, it is a stitch that I use on its own quite frequently, and that's why it's important to make sure that you can get your edges nice and straight, because for things like scarves it is very important, and also for tutorials like my ruffle stitches that I've just done recently, it's an important one for that as well. So I hope it's been helpful, and I will see you for another one very soon. But thanks as always for watching, and do remember to like and subscribe. Bye!